Hello and welcome to the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing, where even the backup podcast host gets a bit of run from time to time. That would be me. I'm here with Brendan Clean, a staff writer here at Awful Announcing. We're here to break down some of the best topics in sports media from this fine Tuesday. And Brendan, I think the top story today is none other than ESPN's lead NFL analyst, Troy Aikman. Aikman had himself quite a game last night, calling Game 2 of ESPN's Monday Night Football doubleheader. Of course, it was overlapping, so we were blessed with two horrible games last night. But his featured backup quarterback Jake Browning and the Bengals against Bo Nix and the Broncos. It was never in doubt the entire game, and Troy Aikman made sure you as a viewer knew that. Brendan,
Yep.
Did you watch last night's game?
No, I didn't because I chose happiness and sanity. But I followed along as, we make it easier for everybody else in the sports world to also do via our X feeds, our social media feeds. And I did tap in actually at one point when I was getting ready to walk the dog and just had like 15 minutes sitting around, and I heard Aikman and Buck laughing at the Bengals left tackle for how many holding penalties he had. So I guess I did see some of the running theme of that broadcast. But yeah, I guess like there's a bunch of bigger picture things that I think about, because I don't think, we need to spend a ton of time on like the intricacies of why Aikman was right about the shit show that the Bengals put on for all of us on Monday. It's a couple different things. And I guess like the ESPN side of it on the first for me is it's just such a sign of how far this relationship has come, right? That Aikman can actively criticize the product on the field, and yet we still feel like the presence of the Buck and Aikman duo on air and all of these moves that ESPN has made to satisfy the NFL, and obviously now their growing partnership, if that gets approved, is still like a positive thing. Like if I guess like what, Greasy or any of the Booger McFarland, like if any of these people had come on and done something like this in the past, we would have had a very different conversation. Like, what does this mean for the schedule ESPN's going to get next year? Or is Goodell going to make a call to Pitaro or to Skipper before that? And now it's just like a round of applause for Troy Aikman for saying what we're all seeing. It's crazy how far we've come.
Is it crazy for me to think that, like, as you said, in the past we'd be talking about, is Troy Aikman risking like losing ESPN good games next season? Like, how is this going to hurt ESPN or Disney's relationship with the league? Now I think it's almost like, is Troy Aikman's commentary actually going to spark change in the NFL league office? Like, is there going to be a mandate for fewer flags? Like, I honestly think that's more likely the direction that this relationship is going at this point.
I agree. I mean, that's kind of the other thing of this, right? Where he has kind of become this like, like Gandalf of the NFL almost. I mean, I don't mean that like I don't want to make him older than he is. Troy's a very, handsome young man, but like, I think that it's this weird thing where people root for him to say the obvious bad thing, and he gets a lot of credit for it because most other analysts, I would say outside of Collinsworth, don't. It's really those two that I feel like will go there, and even Collinsworth leans far more in the negative or in the positive, as we all make the meme out of the sounds and the over the topness of him. But he's not afraid of that either. And it's just funny to me as well with Aikman because, like, Ben and I have a running thing where, like, I'm kind of in the wrong industry because I'm not that big of a football guy as I wear my Padres hat and count down the 48 minutes until opening pitch over there. But, like, this is kind of why I don't love being a fan of the NFL, because there are so many games that go exactly like what we saw with Bengals Broncos last night, and people still eat it up. Like, the ratings will be massive for that game, even though it sucked. And it's also funny to me that Aikman saying this stuff, like, you'd think it would kind of be shunned a little bit, where people don't want to be told that the thing that they spend so much of their time consuming is actually bad a lot of the time, and yet for some reason they like it. They like to be told that you are like eating shit a little bit, and they're like, you're right, Troy, I am, thank you. That part of it is also very strange to me. I don't know if you can explain it.
Well, isn't this kind of the same charm that Inside the NBA has, right? Like, I've never heard Charles Barkley say a good thing about the league, and the past 10 years I've watched that show. Yet it's like literally people's favorite part about following the NBA is watching that show. And you can argue that the NBA has similar product quality issues that the NFL does, given all the problems in that league. But I think it's just like people want to be real about things. Like, obviously people like watching basketball or like watching football when the product is at its highest, when there's an exciting game and the refs aren't getting in the way of every single drive. But when things aren't going that way, it's important to have someone to be a truth teller rather than a PR spokesman for the league. And I think Aikman kind of threads that needle perfectly.
I agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I think like the general tenor around the NBA is kind of that you love to hate it. At least like if you were to just snapshot it in 2025, or maybe like the past, I don't know, post KD going to the Warriors or something, whatever kind of inflection point you want to point to, like that's kind of become the sport of watching the sport, is to just make fun of it and rip it and criticize it. Whereas that's not the case with the NFL. Like that's kind of what I think is so interesting. And maybe it just speaks to the too big to fail nature, where there can be one guy who's kind of over the top critical sometimes in a way that is accurate, and it doesn't really matter. Whereas with Chuck, it actually becomes the dominant story and narrative, and actually goes in a bad direction. But again, I find it funny that we get so much praise for Aikman on nights like this, and yet people will just still sit there and watch the game. I don't get it. I have no like. Did you watch it? I mean, you might have been working, so maybe you're not a good pull on this. But like, do you just sit there and gleefully watch awful primetime NFL games like everyone else seems to? Because sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy.
When I can, I will. That obviously depends on real life circumstances. And I was working last night, so okay. I had the game on until 10 when I signed off, and then I kept it on in the background or whatever. But I think there's just something to. I mean, obviously you have the fantasy and the betting aspects of it all, and I'm sure the audience figure went down, in the second half when it was clear that there's no chance the Bengals were winning that game. But, I just think like when it comes to the NFL, there's just such little volume that people are just excited anytime an NFL game's on, no matter the quality of the game, because Americans just love football. Like, that's just how it is. And I think that's kind of why when you have an announcer like Aikman just telling people, this is garbage tonight, it's kind of okay. I kind of want to torture this NBA comparison a little bit more, because the thing I thought about last night, kind of seeing all these clips going viral, was Jeff Van Gundy. Like, I feel like he is the parallel here when it comes to an NBA announcer who did this same thing. And we all know how that ended with ESPN and Jeff Van Gundy. He is no longer calling NBA games on any network. I don't know if the NFL, it was never confirmed that the NBA had any hand in taking Jeff Van Gundy off the air. We can speculate, but I don't know if the NFL would do the same thing to someone like Aikman, who is such a staple in the sport, obviously had an insanely good playing career, is arguably the top announcer out there. Does he have more leeway, do you think, than a Jeff Van Gundy would have to, kind of critique the league so directly as he did last night?
It's a great question to ask, because I do think the other part of this with Aikman is it's fairly recent, right? That I think there was a dip at the end of his Fox tenure where people started to just sort of think he was a more replacement level, maybe just kind of getting bored with it. He's been open. Buck has been open that the move to ESPN rejuvenated them both. Obviously, it was accompanied by a major uptick in the types of games that ESPN got, so they're calling games that are fairly comparable to what they were getting in that Fox afternoon window for so long. And I think that all the result of all of that has been this kind of emboldened perspective that he obviously has that we're kind of talking about now. So I can't just say, well, clearly he does get the longer leash, because, I mean, the NFL might be responding the way we are. We're like, damn, he really keeps doing this, you know? So as far as a forward-looking, will this end up mattering? I guess I just lean on, like, he has even more longevity than Van Gundy did, at this point. He's also way more famous and popular and in the league and outside of the league, I think, than Van Gundy ever was. And frankly, like, I don't know, maybe this is a bridge too far and you can clean me up and correct me if this feels ridiculous, but I think Buck would respond more strongly than Mike Breen did if they ever tried to do something like that, right? Like, I think that tandem feels inseparable and genuinely tied together in a way that, I mean, Mike Breen signed an extension and went on his merry way and hasn't really made much of a fuss about it. I'm not trying to hit Mike Breen on that, but, like, I don't think Joe Buck would do that.
Oh, yeah, I think you're completely right on that note. Like, Joe Buck negotiated an early exit from his Fox deal to come work with Aikman at ESPN. So I think they are inseparable.
Aikman went first.
Right, yeah. So, Buck was able to kind of pull rank over at Fox and get what he wanted there just to stay with Aikman. That came with a pretty big salary bump as well. So, it's not as if he was sacrificing much there, but it goes to show just how strong that partnership was. And, back to Aikman, I'm not really sure I've heard an announcer so directly attack the product in the NFL. Like, I'm pulling up the direct quote here from last night's game. He said, in quote, "The product's just not very good. I'm going to be honest. It's just not very good. I mean, this is ridiculous." And that was kind of in relation to, all the flags and the penalties that were being thrown during the game. But, it came in the second half when the game was out of hand and, the refs are still making it a ref show. And, he's just calling it how he sees it. I don't even remember Jeff Van Gundy being that blunt about how the poor NBA product.
That quote was open-ended in a way that, is probably just a byproduct of being on live television. I don't think he was trying to say the whole NFL product is bad, but when he just said it the way he did, that might be how some people received it. Either way, yeah, to do that on a live game broadcast is another level, and it's not great. I don't think everybody loves it. You would see people, maybe say that from like a studio show or something, but I don't know.
Is it crazy to me that, like, I don't think the NFL cares? I think they probably like it, and in fact, I think the NFL might actually take his word and say, you know what, he's probably right. Like, look at this crew. I saw some stuff on social media last night about how that particular officiating crew just always has some of the most penalties in the league. Is the NFL going to go and have a word with that officiating crew and say, hey, clean it up? Like, we can't have these games feeling so disjointed, as they were last night. Like, this is bad for the league, bad for the product. Because I don't think Roger Goodell's sitting there and watching that game thinking, oh, this is really entertaining stuff. Like, he doesn't want this to happen either.
Well, I think that's where Aikman, kind of being the veteran of the business, it goes a long way, because, yeah, he's been more frequent with this, but I would say he's still, like, last night, the game, I think there was also an entertainment factor by the end of it where it's like, what else are we going to say? You know what I mean? Are we going to sit here and break down Bo Nix's, check down. No, we're gonna have to talk about the elephant in the room, and that there wasn't even a very specific point to make. But like if you think back to the Mahomes flopping stuff last year, right? That was kind of the last time Aikman took the spotlight with this, where he had a very specific thing he wanted to draw attention to, and it became a much wider conversation about officiating, and he drove a whole news cycle with it. And so I'm sure it's not a bad thing all said and done in the NFL. And my last thought on this is it actually makes me think of an opening for Tom Brady, Aikman's replacement, kind of, by way of Greg Olsen. Because I think when Brady's at his best is a lot of the really sharp and incisive stuff that he's had to say about quarterback development and quarterback coaching. It's not so much an officiating or league criticism at like the league office and like Goodell's shop or anything, but it is when he is saying that, not giving the autonomy to guys at the line of scrimmage to call audibles and read the defense, or, he had something this week on Pat McAfee's X show. I don't know what, that's a Mad Lib of stuff that I didn't know was existing, but I guess Brady had a clip that I saw a part of where he was talking about how, the transfer portal stuff is bad for, like, those are things where I think Brady can kind of take on the powers that be, have a similar stature and level of respect, if not arguably more than Troy Aikman at this point, and cut through. So I think other broadcasters should also kind of be taking note where, this is something you can aspire to do and actually make change. I mean, I think not everybody cares about that or gets to a high enough position to do it, but Tom Brady certainly could.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. When I was, how I wanted to close this topic was, can anyone else do this? Is there any other analyst in the league that could pull this off? And I think Brady is probably the clear option because Collinsworth is a bit too effusive. Some people like that. Me personally, I think Collinsworth is my favorite analyst out there. So, that's one cup of tea. Aikman's, voice is another. But if we're talking about someone that is going to be critical, I don't think there's anyone better than Brady out there that could, kind of take that role. Romo maybe a bit, but like that's just really not his personality. I don't think it's, Greg Olsen's personality either. Obviously, it can't be Kirk Herbstreit. So, when you narrow it down, it really is just kind of Brady and Aikman that could actually have the gravitas and the weight behind their criticisms of the league that could actually make change. So I think that's a great place to end that, Brendan.
Yep.
Okay. We have one more topic, and then I believe you brought a hot mic tonight. So we will quickly go through some breaking news about an hour before we got on the air today. The WNBA Finals are headed to USA Network and Versant starting next year, assuming there is no work stoppage in the WNBA. Starting next year, the USA Network will have some game inventory during the WNBA Finals. We've written about this a bit over at Awful Announcing. I think you've taken a shot at this, Brendan. This really seems to be going backwards. Is that fair to say for the WNBA? You have a deal with NBC. You're probably going to get some games for the WNBA Finals on broadcast, but it sounds like a good portion of those games are also going to end up on USA Network, which is not exactly the first place you think of when you think of, really premier sporting events. So, Brendan, what do you think this means for the league as someone who is, in the day in, day out coverage of this?
So I think you talk about going backward for the league. I think we should go backward in this story. And so this USA deal is happening because NBC Sports, as part of its broader deal with the NBA, got WNBA rights, and then shortly thereafter spun off USA Network and a collection of other networks, cable networks, into what is now called Versant, rather than make space for the inventory it was planning to put on USA Network originally on something under the now just the, Comcast, NBC Universal umbrella that still is there, they're allowing or encouraging or whatever Versant and specifically USA Network to, it's not really a new deal, but it has to be a new deal because it's a different company now, and keep the rights that it had. So there will still be some WNBA games on NBC and Peacock, but there will now be some and very high profile ones on USA Network. So when this idea had first been sprinkled out there, you and I had a little bit of a debate privately. So I feel like you should explain why you feel like NBC didn't just keep all of these rights to themselves, which I think probably would have been an option for them.
Yeah, so under the original deal, from what is publicly out there, it seems that, NBC had the rights to 3 WNBA Finals. These deals were written, signed prior to any official announcement of a spinoff, which means, in theory, NBC likely could have done whatever they wanted with the WNBA Finals, right? Those were not allocated to one network or another. A different part of that deal specifically allocated regular season games to USA Network. So they did have to be involved in some capacity, but it was always unclear what the WNBA Finals were going to look like. So starting this year, as you know, Brendan, the WNBA Finals are expanding to 7 games, up from 5 games in previous years. I think, if you go back a little further, it was a best of 3 even. So the finals have expanded to a best of 7 series, which is a lot for a broadcast network like NBC to commit to when, you're looking at last year's record finals ratings. We're barely cracking 2 million viewers. For broadcast television, that's really not a large enough audience to commit to 7 nights of programming. So probably under the original deals, USA is going to get some nights of the WNBA Finals no matter what. Now it was just a bit convoluted knowing that USA is being spun off into Versant. Now you got to redo the deals, and now it's codified essentially that USA Network is getting some WNBA inventory 3 of the next 11 finals. So whereas
it's probably going to, within a given finals, we still may see the games alternate where they are, right? Is that
exactly
true? So
I
it
think
could
that's
be
exactly
NBC on a Sunday afternoon, and then on a Tuesday night for the next game, it will be USA.
Exactly.
So it's still the same shape that it was going to be before, but
yes, but the difference
like you
here,
said, convoluted because now it's 2 different companies.
Yeah, the difference here is a bit convoluted, and now it's codified, right? So if, let's say, the WNBA Finals see great viewership growth over the next 5 years, and in 2031, I don't know if NBC actually has it, but in 2031, if NBC wanted to air all 7 games of the finals on its broadcast network, it can no longer do that. Now it is contractually obligated to give a certain amount of games to USA Network. So, I don't know when in the rotation NBC comes about, but these deals go through 2036, and you're talking about having WNBA Finals inventory on a cable channel well into the 2030s. I think that's why
a cable channel that its owner has already left for dead. Basically,
right.
The people who run it are already telling you this is dying or going away, or we don't care about it.
And that's why, to me, this is going backwards, because whereas before you had the potential of more broadcast windows, more broadcast exposure, now you're tied in many ways to what I think most would agree is a dying company, at least for a small portion of your finals inventory. And it's it's not good for fans. It's probably not good for the league.
I think that the league part is the biggest. It's just the 11 years of it is the problem for me, right? If this was just going to be for the next couple years, you can deal with it. I agree. There's probably episodes of The Voice that pull more viewers than a WNBA Finals game. Like, that's just the way that it is. But we know that this league is on its way up, and it wouldn't be a surprise to see a Caitlin Clark final. I mean, the Fever may make the finals without her. We don't know what's going to happen tonight somehow. So like they could easily be in the mix here, and those ratings would be astronomical. So that's the tough part, is just to be stuck in this for 11 years. I would say that, you know, my one hope is that the obviously still close business relationship between NBC Universal and Versant can help here, where, you know, in the short term, we still have an understanding, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Versant could license its sports inventory to Peacock as its streaming platform of partner of choice, right? Like they could,
I believe,
reverse engineer some of their content back to Peacock, technically in a different way because it's not the same company, but that could still be the case, or anywhere else. But I would imagine Peacock is the most likely place for that all to land. And so that would make it, more people have USA Network still than Peacock, but considering you already need Peacock to watch a lot of other sports, I would argue that that might actually be the better place for those games to be for the types of fans that the WNBA is hoping to get than USA. And so that could be a saving grace. And then long term, you might hope, and that's the other part of this, is we don't even know what Versant and USA will look like. It's a month-to-month proposition as to, does this company exist? Who owns it? Where does its content go digitally? All these questions we have no idea about. But just assuming it stays as just this spinco by itself for the next little while, I don't think it would be crazy to imagine a world in which, let's say, the Fever and Caitlin Clark make the finals next year, or, you know, whatever, that they pay USA to take back the inventory, to simulcast game, whatever it ends up looking like, on more accessible, more widely available platforms for select playoff types of matchups when the time is right.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. We already know that NBC is actually selling advertising inventory for Versant for like the next 2 years, even after they're spun off. And I believe the spinoff becomes official Jan 1, 2026. So we only have 2 more months of this bullshit of like saying they're kind of separate, but not really separate yet. Next year, they will officially be a new company. But I think your scenario is completely right, where like if Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever are in a WNBA Finals series, we're not going to see that exclusively on USA Network. Like they're going to have to figure something out to get that on NBC, because like we're talking about potentially 8-figure audiences at that level. You know, if we're going off of, you know, how Caitlin Clark drew during her time in college, like WNBA Finals could be similar to that. If not, it could be at least high single digits. And those are audiences that broadcast television do not really see for their just normal primetime programming anymore.
I think we can skip my hot mic because I have one more part of this that you and I had talked about privately, which is the other non-ESPN partner for the WNBA that's coming in and how their setup and potential viewership compares, right? Which is Prime Video.
Sure.
I have no idea what to expect with non-NFL live sports over there. I know that there are some data points that I probably could have paid better attention to along the way with NASCAR and, you know, Yankees games and whatever, but, you know, like, how many people are going to watch the WNBA Finals on Prime Video in the alternating years where they have it? Is that necessarily? I know I'm making the case for Peacock, but that's just compared to USA. But in general, you know, I look at like MLS or baseball and some of these leagues and events that have gone to streaming and maybe jumped the gun, and I do get a little bit nervous that, you know, is there going to be that same level of habitual tuning in from the average fan that the WNBA is still trying very aggressively to win over, to go to Prime Video on a random weeknight during the NFL season to go watch the finals on Prime Video compared to, at the very least, ESPN is ESPN. And that's where every WNBA Finals has aired for most of our lifetimes and most fans, time that they've been paying attention to it.
Right. I believe their first finals would be in 2028. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's the case. So
it's NBC
you are
next year, right? And then
and then
ESPN,
I believe ESPN
back, and then Amazon. Okay.
Yes, I believe. So that does give you another 2 years, but I think just generally speaking, regardless of when Prime Video's first WNBA Finals is, we're talking about a service that has nearly the same amount of subscribers as there are pay television households in the United States. So, we can compare Prime Video to Peacock, and Prime Video's got 4 times the amount of subscribers almost. So we're talking about a platform that is very wide reaching, but I believe your concerns are valid because there is not that habitual viewership yet on Prime. People aren't just flipping on their TVs and going to Prime Video to
or paying attention the way that they do with ESPN on what might be on that night. People open the ESPN app and the main live video that's about to play is the game that's on the network actively. That it's built in there.
Yeah.
And Amazon has a lot of subscribers, but a lot of those people just get free shipping, and so it's hard to tell, are those people who are regularly logging into the app and watching it, or are those just people who can be counted to make Amazon look better?
No, you're completely right, and that's going to be the big lift for the WNBA and whatever other live sports properties end up on Prime Video is how do you get those casual viewers? Do you have to integrate into these pay TV systems, in the channel guide, and somehow make that that experience a bit more seamless? I think that's where things are headed, but those are big battles that these multi-billion-dollar corporations are going to have to fight over, because ultimately that is going to decide how viewing of live sports is actually being done for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So I think right now it's going to be a really big frustration and point of it's going to be tough for these leagues to kind of overcome that, because there's just so much transition in the industry.
Yeah, and I think the smaller leagues, just bear the brunt of that. The NFL can go wherever, and people will tune in, and it's going to be, the YouTube game was a disappointment because it was fractionally smaller, but these smaller leagues that are still seeking new audiences, it's just a strange position for them to be in, where technically a bigger subscriber base might actually disrupt or hurt them in some kind of way. So, it's interesting for people like us to comment on, but, like you said, the leagues and the fans are kind of in the middle of it.
Yep. Well, Brendan, thank you for joining me on this fine Tuesday for the play-by-play. I'm sure we'll have another live episode probably on Thursday, so stay tuned for that. Remember to subscribe, and thank you for listening.